Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be covering off a bunch of different deck list options that you can try out for the upcoming Timeless Metagame Challenge. So it'll be best of 3 Timeless. For those of you who never played Timeless, new to Timeless, think of it as like Arena Vintage. Every card's basically legal except 3 cards that are restricted: Channel, Demonic Tutor, and another card, that Tybalt's Trickery. But everything else is free game. Free to play, like free in terms of you can add it to your deck. All are true to paper printings, so it's very high level format. We're going to be looking at a bunch of different deck lists today. We're going to be looking Diamond to Mythic rank throughout of it, and we're going to be focusing about the last month's worth of data in terms of finding the deck lists themselves. So we're going to be focusing on like the popular decks. There's slight configuration changes you might see. I would say largely, given the population isn't huge for best of 3 Timeless, so win rates will be slightly inflated in some cases because there's some folks who do very well with certain decks and they're just not highly played, so you're not seeing mirror matches kind of bring them down, or just more like your average person kind of play. I will say, for the most part, Timeless tend, at least from my experience, there's a higher play level, I find. I just feel like it's a little bit more enfranchised players who typically are slightly better than like you would have like a Standard or an Alchemy, where it's more like open to like newer players or less experienced players. Like, that's my perspective on it. Let me know if you differ from that. But we're going to get the data from Untapped GG for the most part. Companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, aggregates your win rates with other users, gives a whole bunch of cool stats. Link is in the video description for Untapped. I will paste these deck lists and timestamp it for your viewing experience. And as always, you can see in the top right hand corner, we're trying to hit 15,000 subs on the channel. Trying to get there before my birthday in June. So that would be a nice birthday gift. It's free to sub, helps out the channel. So greatly appreciated if you can support. So we're going to start off looking at the popularity of decks, and we will then move to the deck lists themselves. One thing here, because this popularity of the day, it's only April 4th, there's not a huge amount, and by a huge amount, I mean basically no data in the Diamond rank of folks kind of playing in terms of volume. So we're going to just look at Platinum to Mythic for this time being, because even some of the Mythic players would have just been ladder resetted down a bit. So most popular deck and kind of the boogeyman of the format, Show and Tell at 15%, Jund midrange 15%, the Domain Aggro basically 15%, so you're 3 there. Then we have a number of decks in the 5% range. We have 4-color Yawg, Grixis Shadow, Rakdos Burn, and then the Winota decks as well. So like I mentioned, we are going to look Diamond and Mythic rank, and we're going to look March 5th through April 4th. So about a month's of data, 13,000 best of 3 matches were played during that time. So we're going to jump into it, and we're going to start off with a very unique Grixis Shadow list. So very high win rate, over 29 games, 29 matches likely, means it's all one person kind of playing the deck would be my assumption. And so again, focus less on like the win rate, more just on the collection. So typically these Shadow lists, it's being classified as Shadow, but this version's only playing a single Death Shadow in the list. And then a single Ragavan. Its main creature package is the Bowmasters, Death Rites, and Dragon Rage Chandlers in here. You have your Baubles, your Brainstorms, and then just kind of a mix. 1 Fatal Push, 4 Bolts, 1 Unholy Heat. You have your discard package, a couple Spell Snares. Remember, Spell Snare was part of the last set's like list cards. Only being an uncommon where you don't have to pay rares is nice. Counter target spell that costs 2 mana. So basically, let's hit a Bowmaster ideally in terms of cards that would hit. Full set of Treasure Cruise in here to refill your hand afterwards. Drown in the Lock as a counterspell as well. We're also seeing some copy, or a copy, of the Surveil lands make away. These lands are very good in this format because you can play as a 1/of. With all the fetch lands, you can kind of set it up where you don't necessarily need the untapped mana for the turn and just set your draw up, kind of mixed into there. Lurrus Companion, in terms of the sideboard, just more removal, kind of things coming into play from graveyards or libraries, Storm decks, Titan decks, stuff like that. Invasive Surgery is a counterspell for Show and Tell that's fairly useful because it exiles the copies of it. Similarly with Test of Talents, just more situational counters when you want to shift and become a little bit more aggressive. You have Ragavans in here, you can activate abilities. You'll often see Demonic Tutor included in the sideboard of decks. The reason for this is think of Demonic Tutor as basically any of your sideboard cards, just an extra copy. So you can play 2 Test of Talents, 2 Invasive Surgeries without actually having to play it at each time. So it's a little bit more flexible in that capacity. I think it's like Field of the Dead, big mana decks where you can kind of get outgrinded, whatever the verb is there. You can take out the Lurrus and shift into Blood Moon. Be mindful if you're going to shift into Blood Moon to proactively fetch your basics early. From there, we go to Domain Aggro, 78%, 28 matches. So you'll usually see slight variations with these types of decks in terms of the configuration. This one is still on the Planeswalker package for a little bit more grindy elements. Some of the lists are trimming on that. You might see Nashibo Brawler. This is actually a very interesting list. No Nashibo Brawler, Perilous Iteration. So this one's a little bit more mid-range focused. There are versions with Nashibo Brawler, 2 breakouts, 1 Inti instead of your Planeswalker package. Similarly, we've seen some lists go 2 Ragavans, 2 Deathrite Shamans. This version's opting to have a Relic of Progenitus in the main. These are slight kind of configurations in terms of the mana base itself. I'm actually curious just to see. Let's do Kavu. I want to see if there's another list just for consistency's sakes. So it's slightly lower win rate, but I'm actually going to include, I think this is a more sound list. So I'm just going to do a quick executive decision there. So 75%, so still up there. So the reason with this one here, Ragavan's kind of bad into attacking into a lot of decks, just given that like Bowmasters and stuff exist. The Deathrite Shaman's a lot more flexible, helps you provide grind, fixes your mana, helps you accelerate up. This version's Stubborn Denial's in there. You got your Bowmasters, Nashibo Brawler. The breakouts can kind of haste out these big 5-power creatures as well. So I'm gonna link this list. Jingoth the Companion. You have Miscasts in here as just a counter spell. Pick your poison for the Vein Rippers. Various kind of removal, anti-counter spells, Graveyard Hate. Roiling Vortex is for the Show and Tell matchup. They Show and Tell Omniscience, you Show and Tell Roiling Vortex. Every card they cast off of the Omniscience for 0 mana takes 5 damage. So you'll see that as a common kind of sideboard card to hate out in that matchup. Moving on, Rakdos Burn, 78% with 32 games. It was kind of interesting with this one here. We're seeing no Dragon Rage Chandler, no Bauble, and we're seeing no Skewer the Critics in this particular list. I actually think this mana base is absolutely terrible. You shouldn't be playing Painlands or like Pathways, stuff like that. I think the main board's reasonable. I would definitely reconfigure this mana base. You can play the Ruins, get rid of this Blightstithe Pathway, get rid of the Sulphurous Springs, play, like there's no Blood Moon here, so yeah, play, if you have to, like just more fetches if you would, and then maybe another Blood Crypt, just kind of play it like that. I just wouldn't play like this land, and I wouldn't play, like you should max out on Bloodstained Mires before you play the Wooded Foothills, kind of mixed into there. That would be my kind of thought there. But with this version here, you just a lot of burn, bumping the Knights, cheap burn spell. Eidolon could kind of tax your opponent that way there. A lot of cheap kind of 1 manas, play with fires, Rangers, Firebrand. Ring Tempts You is also incidentally okay against bigger things because you can give them unblockable as well. Grafdigger's Cage for, like we mentioned, some removal, Go for the Throat, Molten Collapse. You have Roiling Vortex for kind of the control matchups or Show and Tell, and then Searing Blood for kind of the smaller creature mirrors. Kill a creature, but also deal a bolt to the face as well, which is fairly useful. Moving on, we go to 4-color Show and Tell. So this is probably the best deck in the format. And this version is set up for the combo line. So you'll have a couple different versions of the list. You can have ones with Fae of Wishes. You can have ones with just kind of the Atraxa combo. But how it works, you're basically going to Show and Tell, ideally, into play Omniscience. From there, you're going to play Dig spells, Atraxa, Dig Through Time, Lorien Revealed, Brainstorm, whatever it may be. assemble a team. You're going to find the Mastermind's Acquisition. The Mastermind's Acquisition is going to get Approach the Second Sun. Approach the Second Sun will shuffle into your library. You cast some more like digging effects, and then you cast it again for free, all with 0 mana. See, all these things you're casting for free. With you can take a bunch of damage from the Roiling Vortex in that capacity. You can also just Genon's Blade Atraxa, which wins a lot of games. You can also win at instant speed outside of a Roiling Vortex. So if they have something like Leyline Binding to target your Omniscience, Agent of Treachery, anything like that, Born of the Winds lets you do the combo at instant speed. Against creature kind of decks, you can also just bring in Sarah's Emissary. They can't beat that. Leyline of Sanctity for the more controlling matchups. Corrosive Grip can be brought in dimir. At split second, you can destroy the Omniscience, and then just protection spells and Hand Hate. Some of the decks as well, you might see Bowmasters in the side to kind of shift the game plan against more controlling decks. Just little things to kind of consider there. You might also see something like Deathrite Shaman sometimes in there, but most of them are fairly creature light if they're all in combo. The other version that you might run into will play 4 Fae of Wishes. And what you do is you cast into the Fae, you get Shared Summonings out of your sideboard. Shared Summonings gets you an Atraxa and a Fae of Wishes. The Fae of Wishes then gets you the Approach the Second Sun. You cast the Approach the Second Sun, you cast Atraxa, find the Approach the Second Sun, win that way there. So that's another variant of the combo that you can see. The Fae is also a reasonable blocker early game if needed. Moving on, we go to Mono Green Titan. So this deck is reasonable at beating up on the fair mid-range decks and pretty sucky into some of the combo decks, like Show and Tell, kind of those nature of decks. It's also somewhat soft to Blood Moon, depending on how their lands line up. But with the addition of Archdruid's Charm, it provides a main board answer in terms of exiling target artifact or enchantment. So a useful effect there. Core of the deck, you're basically going to use things like a Boreal Grazer, Kami to put lands in play early, Natural Order into Primeval Titan, get ahead on lands, and kind of go to town from there. You have access to things like Westvale Abbey that you can turn your Field of the Dead tokens into Big Beater, and then just kind of value engines in terms of utility lines, Blast Zones, Caverns, stuff like that. You have Veil of Summer as anti-counter, Get Lost as removal. That includes being able to hit enchantments. Weather Runestone for like the Storm matchup. Boromir will shut off Omniscience. And then Reclamation Sage is also useful to blow up artifacts or enchantments. Moving on, we go to 4-color Yawgmoth, 75%. So this is another deck that's leveraging a cheap creature package, Deathrite Shaman Halfling, that could allow you to turn 3 Natural Order into Atraxa or Craterhoof. And then similar to formats like Modern or Historic, you have Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth, 2 Young Wolves creates a loop where you can target each other and then basically draw as much as you have life. Compare that to something like Innkeeper that offsets the life loss. Hapatra gives you extra tokens, and if you could set up a Blood Artist, you can drain your opponent out at the same capacity. You have Court of Calling to find you respective pieces of the combo. Incidental like Graveyard Hate with Scavenging Ooze. Demonic Tutor can also help you find your combo elements as well. You might sometimes see Agatha's Soul Cauldron as another card in here because you can exile the Yawgmoth and give any of your creatures the Yawgmoth ability as well. So it's like Yawgmoth without Yawgmoth, and we see it in the sideboard here. This list here, you'll also notice a single breeding pool for Test of Talents to help the Show and Tell matchup, but here we have like various effects with Boromir for that matchup, Hand Hate, Artifact removal, and then various kind of removal or hand hates kind of mixed into there as well. Go to Jund midrange, 73%. So a couple different versions of Jund. You might see a Lurrus Companion, non-Lurrus Companion. I think with Jund, the Jingantha Companion version is better. Gets you access to mainboard Blood Moon, but also access to Jarsalt and Lelia for card advantage. This version's leveraging Perleus Iteration to help you find pieces, and has elements of very aggressive starts. You can, as early as turn 3, get a Minskin Boo going, turn 2 Blood Moon potentially as well on your opponent. A lot of just discard effects, removal kind of mixed into there. You have access to more removal, like counters, stuff like that. Just kind of pieces of interaction here, Combo Hate and Necromentia, Fable the Mirror Breaker, and the remaining copy of Blood Moon. Like in the mirrors, kind of like the Jundish mirrors, the Fables go really hard. I personally would probably just even run Roiling Vortex over Necromentia. The problem was in Necromentia, they play Veil of Summer post board, and against your deck, they're definitely going to bring it in. and like the timing doesn't necessarily always work out. You want to be able to like interact with it on the stack. The thing is with Whirling Vortex, you could just kind of cheat it in, and then it kind of stops them in their place there. The one thing with this deck is you don't really have a clean answer with this configuration of the deck to a Resolve Atraxa, which would be quite common in a variety of decks. So you may want to look at something like Shieldred's Edict, for example, or Pick Your Poison as another way to deal with it. So I would probably find place like Terra Sunder's the kind of stretch card, which I don't think is like super flexible. I would probably play Pick Your Poison. And like you need 4 mana to hit the Atraxa there, or Pick Your Poison could kind of hit it that way for cheaper. Then we go to a Dimir Shadowless, 72%. So this one's a little bit more controlling of a deck. We do have the full set of Death Shadows, the Deathrite Shamans. We also have a card that I'm a huge advocate for and would play probably over Ragavan in some of the Shadow lists, the Legtite Stalker. So what makes this card really good is the fetches enable the Delirium. So turn 1, it could be a 2/2 Menace. It also can serve as removal as well, which is pretty nice. The version of this deck here is Dimir with a 1 green land for the Deathrite Shaman. You have Drown in the Locks, counter spells mixed into here, stifles that you can do on like various fetch lands or all the activated abilities in the format. Unearth to kind of rebuy your small creatures as well. Snapcaster Flashback for some value. Sideboard, we have... So the one thing with this, it's heavily relying on these counters for the combo matchup. Again, with Veil of Summer, it's something to kind of consider with that. Just they have access to it. Unmoored Eagle, similar effect as the like extraction effect. But various counters, Graveyard Hate, some removal mixed into there as well. Moving on, we go to 5-color Winota. So this deck was kind of built to target the show and tell matchups. So you basically got a bunch of cheap dorks that can accelerate you. You want to cast the Winota Joiner of Voices, attack with those dorks, get humans into play, which is basically like your Agent of Treachery or your big hits. This allows you to kind of steal your opponent's stuff. You can also natural order into like Craterhoof, Galta that puts cards from your hand into play, or Atraxa. You have Rope Line that puts all your creatures in your hand when when this creature enters the battlefield, you get a token, not a cast, so it gets you more tokens that kind of work. The new card we're seeing here is Amara, Voice of the Conclave. This deck's fairly easy to get into play turn 2, and then it lets you draft a card from the spellbook, which has a bunch of convoke cards. So it has like Knight Errant of Eos, has the make X tokens. It has Loxodon in there, a couple different cards. So it's a pretty solid card, all things considered. Boromir kind of hates on the Omniscience plan. Then you have Grizzled Huntmaster, which lets you basically, you'll see 3 Winotas. Basically, in a roundabout way, this says discard a creature from your hand, get a creature from your sideboard into your hand. So it kind of lets you tutor, so you can get the Winotas, the Boromirs, Akin for Storm. The voice comes in against like the Jundish matchups or the heavy counterspell matchups. Skyclave cards in here, not so much for the life gain, but because it's technically a tutorable land that you can get into play if you need your lands. Graveyard Hate, activated ability hate, artifact enchantment hate, some card advantage if needed. And then you just have some various removal pieces in here. You then go to 5-color. They're calling it 5-color Domain, but this is kind of, yeah, I guess it's 5-color Domain, but not the aggro version. This is kind of the mid-range version. So a lot of cheap kind of removal options, Swords and Push, backed with Deathrite Shaman, Drown in the Lock in there. You have Jar Souls, Okos, Sorin's Ransom, Uros in here, Minsc and Boo, kind of more of a control-y build, Leyline Binding on the top end. You might sometimes see things like Teferi in here, like 3 mana Teferi can also be played. It's kind of interesting as this deck's so soft. They're playing basics just to get around Blood Moon in the sideboard, which is taking up some spots, but various counters, Graveyard Hates, Veil of Summers, Thought Seizes, kind of just tailoring their package depending on what they're running into. Again, Pick Your Poison is a card that I would explore to have space in here. And then lastly, the lists that were on Untapped were not, like I want to give credit to Alth, MTG, very good player, gets Mythic 1 all the time. So they kind of popularized this version of Mono Black Vein Ripper Sorin combo. We tried this earlier in the format in Best of 1, but was a little bit too creature focused with like Bloodghast and stuff. This version is leveraging like Deathrite Shaman, but the core of the deck is ideally turn 1, Dark Ritual, Sorin Impervious Bloodlord, put into play Vein Ripper. Your opponents generally will have a hard time dealing with this type of creature. You also have the ability to go turn 1 Necropotence and draw a bunch of cards. You have things like March of Wretch of Sorrow to help you gain life back, and then just a bunch of kind of removal, discard package kind of in there. You'll notice 1 red source in the Raucous Theater. This will also let you have the Roiling Vortex available for the Show and Tell matchup. So that is it. Hopefully folks have a good turnout, good results. If you get 7 wins with something, drop the link in the comments. Try to give you a primer of what you're going to be going up against, and catch you next time. Thanks for watching.